continuous. He stands as a beacon of truth. He is Abuki Cabal. You are listening to Abuki Cabal.
Welcome to the Abuki Cabal Show.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the show. Keep up with the current trend of this attack on black masculinity in general. So I've got an interesting story that I wanted to touch on today, and this, just came across a couple of days ago. I was talking to some folks who were talking about, this push towards, this representation, this over-representation of the LGBTQ presence in everything that we watch. And I think this article about fans wanting Tom Holland to have or Peter Parker to have a male love interest in Spider-Man 4. We've seen that this trend is doing nothing for the intellectual properties that this is being injected into. And this is being injected into these properties that we love, Spider-Man, Marvel Comics, DC Comics, action movies. All these things are things that men love, and they're systematically being dismantled for the sake of the comfort level of pretty much feminists, because feminists push this in, and if you guys listen to BGS like I do, and, I myself looked into Pauli Murray also, and her injecting, the gay agenda after, or some might say even simultaneously into the civil rights argument and legislation, which I take issue with, because, here we as Black people are fighting to be taken seriously and to be treated equally, not equitably, and just to have an opportunity to show that we can actually, perform. And somehow sexuality, they felt sexuality being injected into this was a good idea. And I would argue that it has not benefited us. If you look at this historically, this effort that feminists undertook, and black gay feminists undertook to usurp the strategies that were exclusive to the black struggle, I think is almost criminal. And we still see it to this day. We still see, white women out in the streets talking about, black women and, black women this, black women that, more black girl magic. And again, I keep emphasizing that the need, you can Google it, you can put it in an AI, the need is clearly there for black men and boys to be addressed, and men's issues being important, yet we are pointing our heads in another direction, and we're sending resources in another direction to a problem that is not as serious as the problem that needs to be addressed. And we've made everything about men into a negative situation, and it is having a drastic effect on our society. Dr. Neal addressed it the other night about whether black men see us as masculine in the first place. And I would argue also that no, our masculinity and our ability to lead is questioned at every level. This is a classic example of it. You cannot take the character for what it is. We are struggling to get the characters to represent what they are in the comic books for those of us who love the characters. Now, all these other people are like, hey, change the character into something else that I can relate to. Well, if you can't relate to it, then don't watch it. But for you to come in and to destroy, what everything that's central to that character is ridiculous. I'll give you a case in point. The things that they've done with the X-Men. They made Iceman gay. Iceman had a more than 60-year history of being heterosexual, and they changed it just for the hell of it. Okay, but I don't want to go too long on the introduction. But what we're gonna address here is why are the LGBT characters so overrepresented in modern television, movies, and streaming? And we're going to explore who's responsible for this, who's responsible, how much money is being pumped into this effort, to push this when no man asked for this who is heterosexual, but we are expected to have to consume this content against our will. There was a study that was in Psychology Today that talked about how men who are heterosexual feel when they are forced to watch, not forced, or just when they are I won't say forced. I'll just say when they did experiments showing them same-sex media. And they said, for men watching, gay men have sex, it was the equivalent to watching maggots eat rotten flesh. They said that, their reaction was the same as someone getting physically ill to the smell of rotten flesh. So, you have a natural response to it that tells you that this is something, that is not pleasant for you. But as Dr. Neal said the other night, I got to give him his props for that when he said that basically that it was like them going and gambling. They just kept doubling down. When they got a win, they doubled down. I want more. I want more. Start out with a cake. No one should deny them, services as far as baking a cake. Then we move to, the bathrooms, and then we move to no one should care about, who they're marrying and what they do in the privacy of their own homes. And that quickly moved into this is not the privacy of your own homes. And I would dare say, if you go and you look at other media like Prawn, where it used to be, separated into the genre that you want to watch. Well, that has been changed. Now, if you go and you specify heterosexual, you will get a mixture of everything in there. You will be exposed to it, whether you like it or not. And I think that is wrong. That is wrong. If I'm not looking for that, I should not have to consume that. I should not even have to see it in the first place unless I'm looking for it, So, this is almost like when, back in the early days of the internet, when, we used to get all of these ads. You would click on a link, or you go to a site and you were inundated with all these ads for prawn when you weren't even looking for that. You would have to get, anti-spyware, programs to try to keep your system clean. That was, pretty much the beginning of spyware and whatnot. Well, anti-spyware, antivirus protections and whatnot. But let's go ahead and let's kind of get into this a little bit, and guess I will leave it here. And we'll just keep talking about, what I found. So, I start off with the premise of whether the representation of the LGBTQIA. Well, let me just stop. Let me go back because I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's talk about Tom Holland first. Okay. All right. So this discussion gained traction on social media after a fan tweeted, "Give him a boy." And the post quickly amassed over 200,000 likes, with many fans arguing that with the multiverse open, there is an opportunity for Peter Parker to explore his sexuality, leading to speculation about a potential or potentially queer storyline. Now, this is in various, publications in the UK, the Daily Express, the Capital UK. Let's see. It's all over Facebook, Quora, several different platforms where they're discussing this. 200,000 fans is nothing. Spider-Man is one of the biggest characters in comics. And, I would say he is second only to Superman. Those are the two biggest sellers for the different media companies, and that is Superman and Spider-Man on the opposite end of the spectrum. On the tops is Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, and in Marvel, I would dare say it's probably Spider-Man, Iron Man, maybe Thor, and I would throw Captain America in there also. So here you have characters that are special to a lot of black men and boys who grew up with these characters, and now they're starting to introduce a lot of questionable sexuality into this. When these if you guys remember, there was this move by feminists to basically desexualize the comics because they felt like that it was having boys grow up into men who were basically objectifying women and whatnot. And now we've gone from that to, how about we just make everybody gay? Let's just make them gay so that pretty much guys like myself and like other people who have grown up with comics we will not buy it. We will not. And if you look at the state of Disney right now, Disney is in disarray because they keep adding in unbelievable female characters, unbelievable, sexual situations, and it's ridiculous. So, now we're going to go off into, what I found when I started looking into this, and they're talking about the representation. So I think, we should start with, the fact that, how much, of this is going on and when did it start? So, I start out, with the question, as the representation, has it increased over the years, and why? And what I got, when I would look into this, even searching for it and whatnot, is the representation of these LGBT characters more, has it increased? Has the characters in media increased over the years? And it's yes, it has. But what you'll get after that is, whether the increase constitutes overrepresentation, they will say that it's basically subjective. But I would argue that it's not. How can something be subjective when you look at the percentages and you see the percentages don't equal what the representation is in real life? There's some people who go out of their house and can't count on one hand the number of gay people that they see. But when you go and you look at your programs, it is extremely high. 10% or more. So I would say that that there's a problem with that. So hang on just a second, y'all. Let me get everything together here. All right, so sorry about that. I just had to kind of mitigate this noise in the background. So let's get back to it here. So what I found was, okay, my first question. When did the increase start? The increase in LGBTQIA representation in media, and when did it start? Okay, the increase in LGBTQIA. Well, I'm just going to say gay because that's just I just can't. It's just too much. So, increase in their representation in media began gaining momentum in the late '90s. And the early 2000s, with a significant acceleration in 2010. The shift was driven by a broader societal acceptance and advocacy by LGBTQIA organizations and the rise of streaming platforms that allowed for more diverse storytelling. Okay, that's what they say, but I would argue that there was not more acceptance, and there still isn't very much acceptance of it in most heterosexual circles. Where there has been a lot more acceptance is in feminist circles. You have women pushing this, and you have the gay communities pushing this. And you have a lot more, of this, this pushing of the trans sector of that, and accepting them as biological women when that's not the case. But when you do this type of research, you will get a lot of the. Some would say that, the psychology communities and the sociology communities have been inundated by a feminist perspective that has made it their purpose to basically exclude objective views of whatever problem that is being looked at with regard to human sexuality, male-female interaction, and the gay community. I mean, you have to be objective with it, whatever you look at. Whether you can't even allow your dislike or whatever the case may be to come into question. You have to look at the data and deal with it as it presents itself. So, as you can see, the push came from their organizations, GLAAD being one of them. Okay, quantifying the increase according to GLAAD's annual Where We Are on TV reports. In 2025, the LGBTQIA plus characters made up about 1.4% of the regular TV characters on broadcast television. Okay, so it says by 2020, the percentage has risen to 10.2% of regular characters on broadcast TV. In 2023, the representation reached approximately 12%. So as you can see, it's increasing. We don't have 2024 numbers, and I'm sure there's going to be a decline now that Trump is in office, because there's been a major pushback. The pendulum has swung back because people are sick of it. And I would dare say that a lot of people say that it wasn't a big factor in this last election. I would argue that it is a lot bigger than you think it is. White women voted with their men on this, and their men are not really that accepting, of this on the political side that is in power right now, and they voted with them. And I just saw an article here yesterday that I read, and it said, okay, over the last 50 years, how many times have white women voted against their men, as far as, liberal agendas and more conservative agendas. And they've only done it twice. But for some reason, black women thought that white women were going to vote en masse with them to further an agenda that they have historically just not really been good with. I think there's an overestimation as far as how big the feminists are in the community. And they are powerful, as you can see. They have gone through, and they have basically, said money, to hell with money, and we're just going to introduce these characters. We're going to, change hair colors and do all of this, this surgical intervention and whatnot. Everything we've been watching over the last, not even last 4 years, ever since Obama came in. That was his big deal. They were even pushing this on other countries. You either accept the gay stuff, or, we're going to cut your funding. Christiane Amanpour has an article, not an article, but an interview where she was questioning an African leader and was telling him that basically, are you trying to press him on whether he was going to accept it? And he said, look, I've got bigger issues in my country, with regard to economics and infrastructure and other things, than to be worried about the gay agenda. And he refused to answer it, but she kept pressing him. So, and that falls into, this media bias that's out here. We are being, we have been, and look, I'm not necessarily a Trump supporter. I support some of the things that he's done. And I've tried to take myself outside of this so that I can look at it, not from a position of anger, but from an objective point of view, to look at what's being done as opposed to what's being talked about. And to assess that situation for advantages and disadvantages with regard to us. And I think that's what we need to be doing. Instead of sitting up, be crying and whining and all that type of stuff, we need to see where we can get in. We're going to take some civil rights losses. We're going to take some losses. So unfortunately, that's part of it. That's who he has aligned himself with, and it is what it is. So we cannot make the environment something other than what it is. We have to deal with the environment as it is. But I've gone on a tangent. So let's move on to the second part of this, which is organizations that are responsible for the increase. GLAAD, Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation. That's the name of that organization. GLAAD has been a leading advocate for LGBTQIA representation in media since its founding in 1985. It works with studios, networks, and creators to ensure accurate and diverse portrayals of LGBTQIA plus characters. The HRC, Human Rights Campaign, okay? The HRC advocates for LGBTQIA rights plus rights and has pushed for greater visibility in media and entertainment. Streaming platforms like Netflix, Hulu, Amazon Prime, etc. These platforms have been instrumental in increasing representation by producing and distributing content with diverse characters and stories. Production companies and writers. Okay, so those production companies, everybody knows that. Look, Hollywood is they have these gay people in there, and they're writers. You have a lot of gay artists and whatnot, and they are writing, their characters in, and with anything that you put out, you have to test the waters and see whether that's something that people want to see, that people want to hear. I mean, one of my favorite books that I got into was Anne Rice's Interview with the Vampire. I started reading that when I was with the Marines, and a Marine gave me that book. I read the book, and I looked at the shows. I also looked at this new television show that they have, and they made it more gay. It was all implied in the books, but that wasn't good enough for them. But I guess if it's central to the character and not just something that's just thrown in there, I guess, okay, that's fine. But it's like there's an effort to make it more, to give you more and more of it, and you can tell that it's a forceful push, So let's see. All right, so here we're moving down to number 3, and that is the reason for the increased representation. Okay, their reasoning is for social progress. They believe that this is social progress, and as societal acceptance for this, the LGBTQIA plus individuals has grown, media has reflected these changes. They also feel like it's their duty to take a position of advocacy. Organizations like GLAAD have pushed for more exclusive representation, and then they try to say market demand, like there's a demand for all of these gay stories. There's demand for people to want to consume this. I remember back when I was in college, they were I don't know if you guys remember the Elin Harris books. I think that was the beginning of the down low black man push, where all the black women were scared to death that all the black men were down low, and they were going to give them HIV and all this other stuff. And it was a big deal. And if those books are really, really explicit, and black women loved it. Just about every black woman that I knew had read an Elin Harris book, and they would, read these books like, 50 Shades of Grey. You remember, you guys know how popular that was at one point, So it's gone from that being something that was shunned to now, with all of this propaganda that's being pushed out here. And that's exactly what it is, because they're engaging in social engineering. They are trying to reshape society by the use of images, music, and the women. Because women are pushing this. Black women push this gay stuff. Why do you care whether they're gay? Why do you care? You must be afraid. All of the shaming tactics and all of the things that they use in order to make you accept it, or make you be quiet and let them continue to gain ground when it's detrimental. They can still, you can do whatever you want to do, whoever you're having sex with, you can do all of that, but you don't have to tell everybody. It used to be in the old days, you didn't have to tell nobody what you did. You were even told not to tell your business. But, this community is very, very over the top. And they have been trying to push for acceptance for a long time. I think music was one of the first areas where they started to really gain ground. Madonna doing Vogue and going to, the gay house, little presentations and whatnot, and bringing a lot of their dance and costumes. Lady Gaga, you see these things help to move that into the mainstream. All of this together, all these different avenues were coming together to basically re-engineer the way that we look at this. And I'll tell you something else, schools, I think there was a saying from one of the Caesars that said, what do I care about the parents when I have the children? If I take them through Roman schools and I teach them Roman values, then they are Romans. Their parents may be barbarians. You can do with them what you want, but the children will be Romans. And that's what we're seeing right now. Okay. So, this, third reason for, well, I take that back. I've already done third. Okay. So then we get down to the last one, and that's creative freedom. Streaming platforms and independent creators have more freedom to explore diverse narratives compared to traditional networks. Okay. So then we go down to 4. Okay. So you have a comparison to actual LGBTQIA plus population in the United States. Well, you would ask yourself, how much of the population do they make up? Okay, so the LGBTQIA plus population, according to a 2023 Gallup poll, approximates their size to be 7.2%, okay, of the U.S. population. All right, so I'm sure that 7.2% over, the entire population, you can easily calculate what is the likelihood of me seeing 12% of them in real life scenarios, and why am I seeing this on a daily basis? And, then they have the nerve to say that, oh, it's subjective as to whether there's been an increase, where if you're showing me 12% of it and they only make 7.2%, and when you stratify that down into each letter, then that percentage goes down. Okay. So it goes on to say of the U.S. adults identified, that's of adults, 7.2% of the U.S. adults identify as LGBTQIA. This percentage is higher among young generations at 19.7% of Gen Z identifies as LGBTQIA plus. And you know why that is? It's because of what I just said. Because it's being taught in schools. They're seeing it on television. They are working any kind of ill feelings that they have about it, any kind of natural, aversion that they have with it. They're working that out of them at a very, very young age. It's just like that show where they, the psychological experiment where they showed, had the kids in the experiment, and they asked them which one is the bad kid. Even the black kid said that the black kid was a bad kid. Even the black kid said that the dumb kid was the dumb kid. All of the white kids said the same thing. All of the different persuasions all said the black kid, because they have been taught. It has been socially engineered in them to believe that we are less than acceptable citizens. Okay? All right. So where did I leave off? Okay, at 19.7% of Gen Z. Okay, representation versus reality. Broadcast television has 12% LGBTQIA characters, slightly overrepresents the LGBTQIA individuals compared to the general population of 7.2%. However, this overrepresentation is not uniform across all identities within the LGBTQIA spectrum. I just said that, okay? It's not, if you are using any kind of logic, you would know that once you take out each one of the letters, once you stratify it, that number is going to go down. So the likelihood of you seeing that is going to go down. You know, unless they tell you, or unless they're dressed a certain way, which is, you know, they do tend to wear it on their sleeves, whereas heterosexual people don't necessarily wear their sexuality on their sleeves, but they think that we do. But that's a perception. And thus, that perception has caused them to come at this in a way as if they are being undermined in some way in society. Okay, so we're gonna move down to 5. 5, breakdown of the LGBTQIA plus identities in media versus population. Now here we go. So it's broken down. Population breakdown by the Gallup poll in 2023. Bisexual is 4.4% of the entire U.S. population. Gay is 1.5% of the entire population. Okay, lesbian, 1.0%, transgender, 0.6%, queer and questioning, intersex, and asexual are less than 1% combined. Media representation by GLAAD, according to GLAAD, gay men most represented, and the representation rate is 40% of LGBTQIA characters are gay men. That's an attack on masculinity. You know, straight men are not out here writing gay characters into clearly heterosexual stories, you know, or stories that have no reason to have any sexuality in them at all. You have gay men present, or you'll have some lesbian present, and now we're starting to see a lot more transsexual. So let's move on. Okay, so you have lesbian women increasingly represent, but still underrepresented compared to gay men. Bisexual characters are growing, but often face stereotypes. They face stereotypes within their own community. You know, Dave Chappelle talked about this, and guess who went after him? The gay community. They all went after him. They all wanted him censured because he was telling secrets. Okay? Okay, transgender characters increasing but still underrepresented relative to their population percentage. Queer and questioning, intersex, asexual, rarely represented at all. Okay, well, how is queer / questioning, how would you represent that? I mean, well, I would say the queer and the gay is the same thing. So, and you have up further in the polling, queer, questioning, intersex, asexuality, less than 1%. But then you have down here at the bottom that they're rarely represented. Now, you can't have it both ways. Okay, so let's go down to 6. Okay, is LGBTQIA representation overrepresented? Perspective matters is what we start out with. Some argue that the LGBTQIA plus representation is proportional or even necessary to reflect the diversity of society. See, here's where all that intersectionality and all of that starts coming into play, and that's all feminism. So they start making everything the same. So we should push this. We should LGBTQIA issues and feminist issues and women's issues and black issues all should be pushed at the same time because we all experience the same situations. That's all bullcrap. That's all bullcrap, and that comes from a feminist perspective. And that is the pollutant that has been added into academia, which has, well, it has, and it's in the process of destroying rational thought. Okay? Okay, well, then we're on number 6, talk about the perspective matters, okay? Now, the second part of that is others claim it is overrepresented, particularly in certain genres or platforms, context. While LGBTQIA plus characters make up 12% of broadcast TV roles, they are still underrepresented in film, advertising, and other media platforms. Overrepresentation is often concentrated in specific genres, and that's teen dramas rather than across all medias. That's because they are starting with the kids, because they are trying to teach these kids, and they know that parents don't have a lot of time with it. That the kids spend more time on social media, consuming content, movies, all that type of stuff, music, and they have hit them in every single one of those genres. And this is quantifiable, it is trackable, and people are looking at this. Now when you start correlating, some of this data alongside the population decline and things like that, you'll see that it tracks with the rise in feminism and the rise in this overrepresentation of this this gay agenda. Okay, but everybody says that there's no gay agenda, but that's just like the devil saying that, convincing everybody that he didn't exist. And that's exactly what's happening here. Okay, in conclusion to this portion, the LGBTQIA plus representation in media has increased significantly since 2000, driven by advocacy, societal change, and market demand. We already said that. While broadcast TV slightly overrepresents LGBTQIA plus individuals compared to the United States population, this varies widely across identities within the spectrum. We already said that as well. Organizations like GLAAD and HRC have played key roles in this shift, aiming to create more exclusive and authentic media. I don't see that to be the case. How is this authentic media when you're overrepresenting the presence of this phenomenon in real life? This is not reality. And, we're seeing this being pushed by corporations. Disney needs to get their shit together. Sorry for the expletive, but they need to get their stuff together. And, with regard to Star Wars, look, Star Trek needs to get itself together. Comic books need to get themselves together. Action movies need to get themselves together. All of this, these attacks by the feminist community and by the gay community on male sexuality and just maleness in general needs to stop. It needs to end. Okay, so I've been kind of broad in this and not specifically going towards Black people. I've talked about us a little bit, but I'm gonna move over and talk about us specifically now. Okay, so here's my question. This is the question that I started out with. Okay, this depiction of Black men as LGBTQIA plus or receptive to LGBTQIA plus lifespan in the United States, lifestyles in the United States, media has increased over the past few decades, particularly into 2010s. Okay, now this is specific to Black men. They started pushing in 2010. This shift reflects a broader societal change, advocacy efforts, same thing that we saw in the broader breakdown, and pushes for more diverse and inclusive storytelling. Below is a detailed analysis of the trend, including its origins, responsible organizations, and funding. Okay? That's what I wanted to. I wanted to isolate. Who's paying for this? They're not doing this out of the kindness of their hearts. And there has to be some monetary effort towards this end. So. The increase in the depiction of black men as LGBTQIA plus in media, it began in the actual 90s. Okay, the inclusion of black LGBTQIA characters in media began to gain traction in the 1990s. Just like I told you, all the Elian Harris books and whatnot, it just started leaking its way in. You got Tyler Perry and all of these types of things, a lot of black men in dresses and whatnot. And also it moves up to the early 2000s with a significant increase in, I'll take that back, and Obama also, in there with a significant increase in the 2010s. This was part of a broader movement towards greater diversity and representation in media. Okay, here are some examples. This is what they targeted. Examples of media depictions: children's books. Books like Julian is a Mermaid by Jessica Love and Prince and Night by Daniel Hack feature LGBTQIA plus themes and characters of color, though not exclusively black men. Okay, comics. Talked y'all about comics. That's my big deal. Okay, Marvel's Black Panther series introduced a LGBTQIA plus characters such as Anika and Ayo. Okay, those are not in the comic books. There was none of that in the comic books. The Dora Milaje are supposed to be the ceremonial wives of the Black Panther. They cannot be LGBTQIA. They cannot be. Okay? All right. So, though not specifically black men, it says with the Black Panther, say DC's Midnighter and Apollo feature LGBTQIA characters, including black men. Movies and television, films like Moonlight in 2016, and TV shows like Pose in 2018 and 2021, and Dear White People in 2017 and 2021. All those movies have feminist undertones alongside this push towards the gay agenda. Okay? Dear White People 2017 to 2021, prominently feature black LGBTQIA characters. Moonlight in particular was groundbreaking for its portrayal of a black gay man's life. Okay? All right, organizations responsible for the increase: GLAAD, Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation. Okay? If you're an alliance against defamation, what does that have to do with pushing? That is supposed to be addressing issues that have come up where defamation is present. Okay? Look up what defame means. That's not what they should be doing. So GLAAD has been a leading advocate for LGBTQIA plus representation in media, including black LGBTQIA characters. Here we have white people pushing that on black folks, okay? And then we got, it goes on further to say, they work with studios, networks, and creators to ensure accurate and diverse portrayals. The Human Rights Campaign, okay? I talked to you about Anthony Mackie. Anthony Mackie had a couple of scenes where he was, called for him to kiss another black man. You have these two masculine black men that have had roles that have been, significant to black men, and then all of a sudden, these two guys are kissing, and. You talk about social engineering. What has anybody even thought about the effects of seeing somebody like Morgan Freeman in a gay scene, or like, let's see, pick somebody else black that we really look up to, and see that guy portrayed as a gay character or playing a gay character, and would they package it as, oh, this will be groundbreaking, this will be your way to an Oscar, you have to step outside of your comfort zone in order for you to be, a great actor. Think of it as like wearing a mask. In acting school, they teach you to wear a mask and still portray the character in a way through your words that will elicit emotion. Okay. That's how they do that type of stuff. That's how they push that and try to make it a benign thing. But it's not benign. It's not benign. It has an effect, because when black male children see men doing this, they have a response to it. Just like if they see a man and a woman arguing, just like if they see heterosexual sex before they understand what it is, there is a response. And it's not necessarily a positive response. But the gay community, they think every interaction, every exposure to gay life is a positive one. But if you listen to them, I mean, how many of these people, how many of these black pastors and whatnot say that they were basically molested? And that's how they started down their road, to sexuality. So let's move on. Okay. So we got GLAAD, we got the Human Rights Campaign, and they advocate for LGBTQIA plus rights and visibility, including in media and entertainment. Okay. The NAACP. The NAACP has supported initiatives to increase diversity. See, this is diversity, equity, and inclusion, but it didn't benefit us. And the portions that they pushed forward were not for us. They were for these other organizations, the LGBTQIAs, the white women, and then down further, the black women, and then the other of colors, then Hispanics, and then black men at the very bottom. And look at all of these efforts that basically undermine, the very issues that black men are talking about. But there are all these efforts to silence black men about what is important to us. What's important to us, what we need to be happy. Whenever a black man or men in general talk about their sexuality, it's a negative. When women talk about sexual liberation and their existence, it's always a positive. You notice that? We listen, but we don't judge. They want life without consequences. And they want to push their agendas on people, regardless of how that has tracked over the last 50, 60 years. Okay. All right. So we're going to move on down. So we got the NAACP supported initiatives to increase diversity in media, including LGBTQI plus representation. And then you got the streaming platforms, Netflix, Hulu, Amazon Prime, etc. These platforms have been instrumental in producing and distributing content with these diverse characters and stories, including Black LGBTQIA plus characters. And then you've got independent production companies. Companies like A24, Moonlight, and creators like Ryan Murphy, Pose. These are gay folks who are basically just putting gay stuff on TV, RuPaul's Drag Race, I can name, quite a few other ones. Look at all of the reality TV shows. Real Housewives always have some gay dude on there. The Real Housewives of Atlanta, they were heavy gay in the beginning. They've pushed it out a little bit since then. But I would dare say all of the women, when they first come onto the show, they look like regular women. Then as it moves on, they look like drag queens. They're dressed in sequence gowns. They wear huge amounts of makeup. And they all got gay friends. They all go shop with gay folks. They all got some kind of gay stuff in there. And then if we could, see who the production people are, you can just about bet that they're in line with some of that. You look at all of the reality TV show programming that we have. It's all gay influenced. You look at all of the people who are dressing the female rappers now, and you got gay rappers now. You had this push to always have these men come out as being gay. Now you have this movement of hysteria that's going on now, to where everybody in rap has given up their butt. So, I think that black folks are way more susceptible to propaganda than we like to admit. And I think this is even more apparent after COVID. I think, that everything that I've been describing here is propaganda. And it's directed at the black community. And it's to the detriment of black men and the black family. It is. Because everything about it is telling you that, hey, family is something that's secondary, or if considered at all. And you should just live this life of debauchery and lesbian and gay excess, and it's worked its way into heterosexual storylines and whatnot. I mean, it's just this grandiose depiction of how they live. And it's, the women are doing the same thing. I don't need this. They're talking like gay men. They're talking like transsexual folks. They're talking exactly like each other, and you have men out here sitting, in the background looking at this, watching this from the outside, going, what the hell is going on? I can't tell these two apart. Minister Japp said a long time ago, transsexual energy, and it's true. When you step back out and you look at it, back in the 90s, when women were they were showing, runway models and whatnot, who was teaching them to walk? Who was teaching them to be feminine? Who was teaching them to be alluring? One of my big things about, picking my girlfriends in the past and whatnot was presentation. If a woman doesn't have her presentation together, she can't present it right, then it's not going to be something that I want, and you can see that in this too. They present it, they show these women how to present, how to walk in heels, all of that. But you look around and you see a lot of women walking in heels like dinosaurs. They're stomping when they walk. There's no sexiness to it. There's no nothing, And, most women don't even recognize it until, like, when I talk to some of my female friends and I tell them, just watch. You come from a different era. Now watch how they present themselves, how they walk, women used to dress, everything had to be right, from their underwear and layered out to what they were wearing on the outside. Now, you don't get that anymore. There's no quality in it, But I'm off in another direction. But so let's get on down to the funding. Okay, funding directed towards this effort. Quantifying the funding. It is difficult to quantify the exact amount of funding directed specifically towards increasing the depiction of black men as LGBTQIA plus in media. However, significant investments have been made in diverse storytelling by streaming platforms. And you know how much money Netflix has made, pushing this agenda, And I'm pretty sure that GLAAD has put some money towards it. I'm pretty sure feminist groups have put some money towards it, but let's stick to it. Netflix, for example, has invested heavily in diverse content, including LGBTQIA plus stories. filming studios, A24, Moonlight, had a budget of $1.5 million and grossed over $65 million worldwide, demonstrating the financial viability of such stories. I wouldn't say it's a financial viability, because how much did it make here in the United States? It didn't make 65 million. You know, yeah, it made a profit, but what it made here would be a better gauge of the audience. You know, and just because you go see something doesn't mean that, you know, you knew what was in it and that you are receptive to what you viewed. Okay, but they're jumping. Okay, so say grants and initiatives. I knew it. Organizations like GLAAD and the Ford Foundation have provided grants to support LGBTQIA plus representation in media, corporate social responsibility programs. All of the things that Trump's trying to fight against right now. He's trying to stop a lot of that stuff because it's like, that's not your, you know, but they feel like this is their duty to basically change people, and they always liken it back to the civil rights movement. If we didn't, you know, show black people, you know, as regular people, none of this would have happened. So we have the same responsibility to do it for the gay community. That's that's the line that they throw out there. It's not the same. Black and gay is not the same. You can't hide being black. You know, and you know, if I'm not mistaken, gay folks were the ones who went out here and forced all of their people out into the public. So all of the, you know, the pushback and the backlash that they're getting, you know, they're saying it's everybody else's fault and not their own, when it's not natural to just, you know, wear your sexuality on your sleeve. It's not, you know. I can't remember who said it, but, you know, when you ask them to define themselves, tell me something about yourself without telling me that you're gay, or telling me about your sexuality. They struggle with that. You know, they get out here and they make comments like, I wouldn't be valedictorian if I wasn't a gay man. You know, you have these women out here. I just told a friend of mine about how, you know, you got lesbians on Facebook and Instagram wearing strap-ons underneath gray sweatpants, trying to be attractive to straight women. And they talk as if that is their real appendage. Now, you know, at some point we got to call a spade a spade. You know what I mean? We got to say that this is not normal behavior. You know, if you go and you read the DSM manual, the DSM-4 TR, you will, you know, or the DSM-5, I think we're up to now. If you read that, it's in there. This suspension of reality is just not, it's not normal. And it's not, I mean, this stuff needs to be addressed by the medical community and the psychological community. But, you know, something else that's being talked about is that, you know, like I said, the psychological community has been inundated with feminists. So when you go and you get counseling, you may get a feminist perspective and not an objective perspective about the problems that you and your wife may be having, or you're having as a man, you know, and I'm telling you, there are therapists out there that are calling this out. They can't call it out in public, but they're calling it out. They will tell you, be careful of who you choose as your therapist because of this, and this. And the things that I'm naming are the things that they've named. You know, some of you guys that have followed me for a while, you know what I do. So, you know, it's out there. You know, we've gone from the times where you know, public debate and discourse was more academic and more respectable, to now we are at a point to where, you know, two things can be true at the same time, and it's just my opinion, whether it's right or wrong. I should be able to put it out there. I should be able to publish it. I should be able to, you know, give it to as many people as you can. But there you have a responsibility to the truth. You know, and not just put things out there that are fake, and the damage that can be done, it can be immeasurable, you know, and I'll leave that there. But let's move on forward here. Okay, so then we've got the fourth one, comparison to broader trends, LGBTQIA plus representation in media. LGBTQIA plus characters make up approximately 12% of regular characters on broadcast TV. So we're getting back into that. I was GLAAD, according to GLAAD in 2023. But Black LGBTQIA plus characters remain underrepresented relative to their population, okay? But if you pay attention, you look at all these AIDS drugs, these preventative HIV infection drugs, all these things have Black representation on there. You know, and that can be looked at in two ways. Oh, yeah, they're finally addressing that they're Black people who need treatment. Or it can be looked at as, oh my gosh, is that many gay Black folks? There was a Archie Bunker episode, you know, where he said, this guy said something about a Black gay person. He said, there ain't no Black gay person, gay men. And he said, and I dare you to go out there. Well, he said the F word, but he said, I dare you to go out there and call 1-1. That's because Black men used to be the pinnacle of masculinity in their depiction in TV and everywhere. I mean, historically, we've been feared for our prowess and even dismembered because of our masculinity, you know, because they did not want their women to see us as a viable option for them. So that's where a lot of the lynching came into play, a lot of the dehumanization, the humiliation that took place. But now we've gone from that to these depictions of men, and they think that, oh, that's like, I had a girl I've known, well, a lady I've known, pretty much all my adult life, and she was arguing with me when I said real man. What is a real man? A gay man can be a real man. That's your opinion, and your opinion happens to be wrong. You know, there's nothing about that that's masculine, and I'll stand on that. You know, so let's go back, and it talks about the okay, comparison to the trends. Okay, so we did the underrepresented in relative population. So then it goes Black LGBTQIA plus population. According to the 2023 Gallup poll, about 7.2% of U.S. adults identify as LGBTQIA, with Black Americans making up a significant portion of this group. See? So by their measure, there's just tons of gay folks out here. But you notice that they didn't say that it's stratified and it being a lot less. They didn't say that. But I would say that, you know, I think I can tell that those who are identifying in that persuasion is increasing. Black girls are even more vulnerable to that propaganda. And more of them are identifying as either bisexual or as lesbians. And there are a lot more of them that are trying to go trans as well. Okay, so let's go down to some of the impact and the criticism. Okay, first they start out with the positive impact. I'm not surprised. Okay, increased representation helps normalize LGBTQIA plus identities and provides role models for Black LGBTQI plus youth. Criticism: some argue the depictions of Black LGBTQI plus characters often rely on stereotypes or focus on trauma rather than joy and everyday life. Others claim that the increase in representation is driven by performative allyship rather than genuine inclusion. I agree. Okay, now in conclusion, says the depiction of Black men as LGBTQIA or representative of LGBTQIA lifestyle has increased in U.S. media, particularly since 2010. The shift has been driven by GLAAD, HRC, and streaming platforms and independent creators. We all covered all of that. While exact funding figures are difficult to determine, and why do you think they're difficult to determine? Because they don't want you to know that, because that would be a point of contention. If we knew that there were organizations out here that are basically pushing that on our kids, which there's some pushback on that now. You know, you got, transsexuals and drag queens and whatnot reading to children. That's sexuality. You're reading to a child, and that child knows that you are not a woman. That child sees you and is like, this is some weirdo stuff right here. I mean, and then they start looking at the other folks, and then you have the adults saying, it's okay, and then the child eventually ends up just not saying nothing about it. Okay? All right, so those characters remain underrepresented relative to the population. And the quality and authenticity of their portrayals was the same. Okay, let's say, was the same efforts directed at Black women? If so, when and by whom? Also has how much money was utilized to bring this about was the question that I said. Okay, was the same effort directed at Black women? And if so, how much money was involved? And the answer is yes. There has been an increase in the depiction of Black women and girls as LGBTQIA and or receptive to LGBTQIA plus lifestyles in U.S. media. Though this representation has historically lagged behind that of other groups, below is a detailed analysis of the trend, including its origins, responsible organizations, and examples of their representation. Okay, so let's move on to that. And that's, wow. Yeah, y'all, this is probably going to be quite a bit, but I'll stick with it because I think it's important. All right, lost my spot here. Okay. All right, number one, the increase in Black women and girls as LGBTQ plus in the media. The inclusion started in the 90s, also increased in the 2010s. So this effort was at the same time as they did Black men. Okay? So then they started putting it in children's books. Books like Heather Has Two Mommies by Leslie Newman, and This Day in June by Gail E. Pittman included LGBTQI plus themes, though specific depictions of Black LGBTQI plus women and girls are still rare. Okay, in comics, okay, they made Batwoman, Kate Kane, made her gay. They're saying now that Marvel Storm has explored some gay themes, LGBTQI plus themes. Those Storm LGBTQI plus identity has been more prominent in fan interpretations than in mainstream canon. Exactly. So what you have a lot of is the same thing that happens with like Star Trek. You had people out here making Spock and Kirk gay, and kissing and all that. If you go to like Art Station and things like that, you have these gay artists that are basically putting that stuff out there, and then they put their art out there, and it just becomes this perpetual movement towards the thought process that these people are gay. The same thing with Batman and Robin. They were trying to say that Batman was going out getting these young boys and whatnot. That has been a thing that has been thrown out there, which is can't be farther from the truth. So then you go to movies, The Color Purple, 1985, 2005, and in 2003, in the 2023 musical, featured LGBTQIA plus themes and relationships involving Black women. Pose, again, 2018 to 2021, includes Black transgender women as central characters. Their names are irrelevant to me. I'm not going to even go down their names. Okay, Orange is the New Black, 2013 to 2019, features LGBTQIA plus women. And like Pussy Washington and Susan Crazy Eyes Warren. Okay, Insecure, 2017 to 2021, BGS has covered that. Includes LGBTQIA plus characters and storylines, such as the character Amal D, though the focus is not exclusively on Black women. Okay, number two, who's responsible for all of this? The usual suspects: GLAAD, the Human Rights Campaign, the NAACP, all of the streaming platforms, and companies like A24, shows like The Farewell, the creators like Issa Rae, and have prioritized exclusive storytelling. Okay. All right. Funding directed. All right. As with Black men, it's difficult to quantify the exact amount of funding, especially directed specifically towards increasing the depiction of Black women and girls as LGBTQIA in media. However, it says that significant investments have been made to this effort by streaming platforms, film studios, grants and initiatives, corporate social responsibility programs. Okay. Comparison to broader trends, the LGBTQ plus representation in media, the characters make up 12%, okay? But LGBTQIA plus girls remain underrepresented. So if you're showing 12%, but you really don't know what the number is, but we know that the number is 7.2%, and that's all of them. We've already covered that. Okay. The impact and criticism. I'm sure it's probably going to be about the same. Increased representation helps normalize the LGBTQI identities and provides them with kids with role models. Okay. And some of these girls with role models. And I think to some degree they get to explore certain sexual acts without involving men, and they tend to do that because they've gravitated towards needing men. If you go back and you look at, the beginning of the feminist movement and the ERA period and all of that, they talked about these women's groups that were getting together on like these classifieds and whatnot. And a lot of these women were lesbians, and they were they were hunting. They would bring these women in talking about feminist politics and issues, and in the process of that, they would befriend these women and end up in lesbian relationships. That's established. That's a fact. That's not speculation. That's a fact. They talk about it. There are documentaries that talk about it. The Combahee River Collective. Those were all lesbians who got together and were talking about feminist agendas. But, these were not, I would, why were heterosexual women not, why was their agenda not good enough to cover all of them? They're women, aren't they? But that's neither here nor there. That's for, speculative thought and, critical thinking skills. Okay, so, all right, so the impact and criticisms: increased representation identifies identities and with the LGBTQI plus identities and provides role models, for women and girls. Okay, criticism. Some argue the depictions of LGBTQI plus women and girls often rely on stereotypes. Same thing they said about men. Stereotypes, and they're not reflective of the real world. Okay, others claim that the increase in representation is driven by performative allyship rather than genuine inclusion. Yeah, so people get together, they're allies, so I'm going to perform this, we'll just do this, but I'm not really into this, but I'm doing it for the greater good. Okay? There is also criticism that Black LGBTQI plus women and girls are often sidelined in favor of centering Black men or white LGBTQIA plus characters. So they're fighting amongst themselves for the scraps that they're given with regard to depicting this gay lifestyle as if it's, indicative of the whole of society, So here's some key examples. We already talked about Pose, featuring Black transgender women in leading roles. Queen Sugar, 2016 to 2022, included LGBTQIA plus characters and storylines involving Black women. The L Word, Generation Q, 2019 to the present, features Black LGBTQIA plus women in prominent roles. Movies, The Color Purple, okay. Pariah in 2011, focused on Black lesbian teenagers coming of age, okay. Books, The Color Purple, Alice Walker, we all know about Alice Walker. Zammy, A New Spelling of My Name by Audre Lorde, a biomythography exploring Black lesbian identity. Okay. All right. So, that is pretty much it. I've got a little bit more, but I think I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I'm telling you, look, this is an example of the propaganda that the Black community is being inundated with. This is one aspect of it, and we have to be mindful of that. It's not a good thing. And this is something that we have to be mindful about as far as our kids and their futures, how they view things, whether it's real or whether it's something that's artificial. And more of us need to deal with this and really talk about the effects of propaganda on the Black community and track it, show where it's trackable. From the 70s on up to now, we have not benefited from this push towards more feminism and more gay.
You are listening to Abuki Cabal, the analytical savage.
So, I hope that this was informative and that you guys enjoyed it. I am going to go ahead and shut it down. You guys, please like, share, and subscribe if you enjoy the content. I am working on trying to do shows more, but it is a challenge working and having to do the research and then present it, doing the thumbnails. I do everything myself. I'm trying to teach myself how to edit my videos as well, to try to get them make them a little bit better. But like I said, if you enjoy the content, if you think what I talk about is interesting, if you think these things are important to our community, then please, support the channel, support others who talk about these things, because these things need to be talked about and they need to be addressed. And, I think this is important because pretty much, we've had, 2 administrations that went all in. I mean, that this was the hill that they wanted to die on, and they pushed this, Trump just went after an organization that they found was out, basically churning out, information about, transsexualism and gay stuff to all these other countries that we wanted them to basically go down that road, and we were pumping propaganda into their countries to that effect, and that funding was stopped. USAID, So, yeah, like I said, I'm going to go ahead and end it. You guys, let me know what you thought in the comments or what you think in the comments. I appreciate you guys listening. Whenever you listen, you know, day, night, evening, whatever. I appreciate you guys, and I am out.